Hello and welcome to day 5 of week 2 in the Adventure Box podcast. If you have missed the other ones, you want to go see them because we're going to be talking about the Native American cultures up in the North America, and you need to be able to know about the other ones that we've already talked about. So some of the things that we've already talked about, just to give a little recap, is this. I'm going to bring up a picture. Actually, I'm going to bring up the map. Let's do the map. Okay, so back a very, very, very long time ago, we can only assume when it was, we actually had Native Americans that came from Russia or Siberia and came over the Bering Straits. Now, again, as we keep telling you, that there's a big lake in the middle of the Bering Straits, so they would have had to find ways around that deep spot when the water receded. And so they were able to follow the herds of woolly mammoths, bison, and other things, other animals, to come over. And then in Alaska, there was already other animals that were here that were not over here. So all they had to do is follow the food here, and then they'd find different types of food. Now, of course, most of the Native Americans actually stayed near the coast. The Arctic stayed up north in this area. There was a subarctic area as well. But then the northwest coast culture stayed in this area right here, anywhere from southeast Alaska all the way down to Washington and even up to Oregon. Then there were, we talked about it yesterday, where the Adena and the Hopewell Indians, which stayed over here in the Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, Kentucky, Missouri area, the northeast of the United States, but the east of North America, central east of North America. That was the Hopewell and Adena tribe. Today we're going to be talking about 3 different tribes, and we're going to add a few more because, again, we're not going to be able to cover all the cultures that were there because there were subcultures as well. Most of the cultures are the main hubs of people, groups that went to settle that they have record on. So there was probably other groups, but there are no archaeological findings, so they can't assume that there was other groups because they have nothing to back it up. All they can do is find the places that they actually have dated material. Again, carbon dating as far as accurate as possible to get back to a place where they can understand where the cultures were when they were. So the idea was that they came across the Bering Straits and then trickled down into the lower North American area. So as they came into this area, there were 2 prominent ones in the west. Actually, there's 3 prominent ones. In the book, we don't actually cover the 3rd one, but if you're from California or Oregon, you got to look up the California culture. Again, it wasn't the most prominent as the other ones were, though it was prominent. So we just don't have enough time to cover them all. So here we have, I will show you in this diagram. Let's extend this just, oh, let me get rid of the map. Okay, in here, you'll actually see that the Arctic is up here. Everything in Alaska, on the west coast of Alaska, and up near the top of Canada. So that would be the Arctic. Come down a little bit lower is the subarctic. Now, not as many tribes settled in this right away because there was no food. The food was a lot more scarce in this area. At the same time, because there's not a lot of tribes in there, you had very nomadic ones that would follow the herds, and so they didn't have much competition. Those that were in the Arctic stayed basically where they could get fish, food from the sea, and also picking off a few of the land mammals as well. Now, the Northwest coast culture, this is one that continued to want to be able to fish and stay near the sea. That's why these are the 2 prominent at the beginning, the Arctic and the Northwest coast culture, because these were people that stayed near the sea as much as possible. You go down lower, though, you have the Northeast, which the most prominent were the Adena and the Hopewell culture, not tribes, cultures. Because again, these were groups come down around the time of the Neolithic era. Now, when the Neolithic era came up, basically when people decided, hey, we want to be more permanent in one area, and we want to set up tribes or villages for our tribes. That's when it became the Neolithic era, and they all broke apart into the many, many, many different types of tribes that were in that area. I'm going to show you a few of them from these two prominent ones, the Plateau and the Great Basin. Those are the ones we're going to be focusing on today. And then one other one that's down here, which is called the Poverty Point culture. Sorry, it's on the top of my tongue. Okay, so let's go into the Great Basin. Great Basin it is very prominent in what you'd see as the West, like the Wild West, how the West was won, all these different things. A little bit of Southwest, mostly the Great Basin, not even much of the California tribes. But again, this is the culture, not the tribes, not the individual tribes. This is why. Okay, so we go to the Great Basin. This is what you'd see for the Great Basin. You have the Spokane. You have, now, these would also be considered part of the plateau. This map shows a little bit of the plateau as well. But you have, well, let's just go back down to where the actual Great Basin tribes are. So you have the Bannock, you have the Shoshone. Shoshone were everywhere. Utes were everywhere. Even down to lower Utah, which is where you find the cliff dwellers. Oh, my mind is not working today. I will get you that in just a minute. But you have a lot of other tribes built into this area, but the Utes were huge down in the Utah and Colorado area. Shoshone, the Bannock, the Paiute, and then you have the Madoc, the Klamath, and the Yahuskin. And I am going to be butchering some of these names, and I deeply apologize because I have deep respect for the indigenous people and for the Native Americans in North America. Okay, so, okay, as we go, these were again, they were sophisticated people. Again, we like to say that they weren't that sophisticated, but we actually have a lot of information that they were very big into engineering, into learning about their environment and how to live in their environment. And as we talked about yesterday, the major focus of all these people is to be able to survive. So in this survival, they want to be able to do things that they find the most essential. And the most essential is not finding out a way of using the computer or creating the computer or internet. It wasn't back then. But even more to them, they didn't care. They were not about making advancements into sciences and other things. They were about survival. So the sophistication became part of their mission. So their sophistication was about learning about their environment and finding out ways of using it. Again, we're going to be talking about this more. If you're going into ancient civilizations, you're going to be learning about more of the domestication of animals, agriculture, and why it wasn't like it is today. Farming now and having herds and having animals, livestock, is completely different than what it was before. Think of it this way, though. Those of the past, all the people that kept livestock, all the people that grew crops, they were the ones that learned everything that we already know. So they were learning which plants can mix, how to genetically engineer their crops to be more sustaining during droughts, being able to flourish during large rainfalls, all these different things. They were learning about the different parts of their environment, which is about their safety and survival. That's what was important to them. And so they didn't need to know all these other things that were happening around them. They didn't even want to know about what was happening outside of their general area. Because the thing that became the most important to them with survival was either taking care of their families, raising food, or keeping safe from their opponents. So now I shouldn't say enemies, but their opponents when it comes to, they had other tribes trying to come into their territories and trying to take their livestock or other means of survival, including the herds that were going around. So one of the reasons why people started creating these dwellings is because as a nomad, you don't have any land. You travel with the herd. Well, as other people are solidifying their villages, their areas, you have all these other people that are just like, we can't go into your land anymore, so we better just stake our property, our land. Uh, I'll give you one example of how this really influenced the Americas. Okay, so we're going to learn about this in the future. So next month, we're going to be learning, if you're learning American history, you're going to learn about the age of exploration. There was a Dutch group, the Dutch West India Company, that came into the New York area. They purchased the land from and I can't remember the tribe, from the people that were there for, we like to say, oh, it was around $60 worth of European goods. But it wasn't $60 worth of European goods. Anybody that tells you that does not know what they're talking about. It wasn't just $60 worth of goods. No. See, what happened was those that lived in that area did not believe that people should own land. They did not have distinct areas. These are people that were way past the Neolithic era. But they believed that they were nomads and were able to travel within a certain amount of space. That $60 was allowing the settlers to basically buy the land, which means buy the rights to be able to live there while they set up their own settlement. And so that tribe, which actually owned a lot more land than that, was okay with them settling in that area because that tribe did not say that they actually owned that land, because humans, according to them, did not own land. Land was for everyone to enjoy. So yes, there was a little bit of miscommunication, but it was also the fact that they didn't actually own it. So $60 worth of goods, which the Native Americans at the time wanted to have, was actually acceptable to them. Anybody that goes back now and says, hey, we should have gotten more than that, we need to have reparations, you don't understand the past. Again, like we said from the very beginning, when you look at history, you cannot look at history saying, this isn't what we believe, and they have to believe the same thing. No. You have to go in with an eye open to what they believed at the time. So, again, you might say, that's land that they owned. No, that Native American culture did not own the land. They did not believe that humans should own land. Instead, they gave them the rights to be able to settle there and to set up their own establishment. Now, they did actually believe, the same group did believe, that people that settled in an area have claim to that area. This is why they never had a huge fight saying, hey, you robbed us of that. No, it was an agreement. It was a shake of hands. It was a word of mouth oath to each other. And it was an exchanging of goods for a piece of property. Now, again, Native Americans didn't see it as property, but the Dutch did. And as you know, the Dutch then lost it to England, and so on and so forth. So it went from being New Amsterdam later on to becoming New York, and so then becoming New York City, and actually becoming the island of Manhattan. Okay, now let's go back to the Great Basin tribe. So these are those that were in the Great Basins. These are the major tribes in this area. A lot of smaller tribes are actually considered Utes, but with their own families, or are considered Shoshone, but with their own group. So, and I found out who the cliff dwellers were. I should remember this, but I had the Plateau and also Paiute in my head, so I knew I wasn't right when I was thinking those two words, because it's another P word. It's the Pueblo. They were known as the Pueblo people, and the Pueblo people lived in cliff dwellings underneath the rock so that it had shade during the hottest parts of the day. It also gave defense against invading groups. So they lived there for 600 years, and then somewhere around 1300 BC, they left, and no one's dwelled there since then. So there's a lot of archaeology that's been there. I've been there. It was a great place to visit, and that's in the Southeast Alaska area. someone in Arizona too. So the cliff dwellings were all over. The major one is called Mesa Verde. So actually, let's bring up the map and I will show you that. Okay, so let's type in Mesa Verde. Oh, sorry, Colorado. Oh, it wasn't Utah. Colorado. So Mesa Verde is the cliff dwelling over here. I'm glad I checked this out. That I was wrong. It's not in Utah. It's in Colorado. So here's Colorado. Here's Utah. So it's near Four Corners, but it is still in Colorado. So my mistake. Okay, so going forward, this is, again, the Great Basin group. Now, if we move forward, we will actually see, oh, and Great Basin. So here's another illustration of the different tribes that were here. So you have the Paiute, the Shoshone. Again, as you can see from the two different maps, it's a little bit different where the areas were. You have Bannock, again, Shoshone, they were all over the place. Paiute were in two different areas. And again, these are groups that would mix together, but they would also attack each other to take over territories and in other disputes. And the Pueblos were over here in this area. Again, this is only up to 1300, so this group, when this was taken, is probably discounting them because it was only up to 1300 BC. Okay, so next let's go to a picture of the Shoshone. So this is a very old picture of the Shoshone outside of their teepees. So this is the kind of landscape that they live in. These are some of the dwellings that they would live in. The Shoshone usually lived in teepees with hide-covered teepees, which would have usually one opening for you to come into and one opening at the top for the smoke to leave, because they would actually have fires within their tents. Yeah, I'll leave it there. Okay, because we got plenty more to show. And this is the more modern day late 1700s, early 1800 type. Well, actually, no, probably late 1800, early 1900, because it's a photograph of what they would have looked like. So a very proud and distinguished group there. Okay, this is a horrible picture. I wish I had gotten a better picture than this. Okay, so this is the indigenous people in the plateau area. Now, let's go back to, I know we did have this over here. This was more of the plateau area up here. It spanned from Canada down into Washington, Oregon, and Idaho. And this included the Coeur d'Alene natives, Spokane. So yeah, Spokane, Washington was actually named after the Spokane natives, as well as the Utes, Utah being dominated and also named after the Utes. So a lot of times that happened. You have the Colville, and then you have the Pen de Oreille. Okay, that is really, really bad pronunciation. I need to find out how to actually say that. I'm going to find for us the phonetic way of saying that name. Okay, so phonetically, how do you say it? How do you say this name? Okay, it's called the Pont de A. Pont de A. So Pont de A tribe. Okay, so that is also one thing to know, is that sometimes we like to say, oh, we know how things sound, but we actually need to look it up. Okay, and then we have the Kootenai. Kootenai? Let's try this one. Okay, Cootenau, or I. How do you say it? How do you say it? Okay, here we go. How do you say it? Kootenai. Kootenai. So the Kootenai tribe, I'm glad I asked because I was way mispronouncing it. Okay, so there are a lot of different tribal names that are, again, not meant for English. They're meant for their own languages. So each tribe had a shared language in this area, in this culture. And then it started to break off. They created their own dialects. For this, and so one big thing to know is that they were still able to communicate with each other, though they had their own breakoffs of their languages or changing of their languages. This is very important to know because with trade, you want to be able to communicate with them. When the Europeans came over, it was very hard for them to actually learn the language of each of the different European countries that come in. Not really the plateau or the Great Basin area, but on the East Coast. So that's why you're going to learn about some great people during the Age of Exploration. In that curriculum, you're actually going to learn about people that stayed to live among the native tribes, the indigenous, in order to learn their language. Then they became translators between the two cultures, whether it was Spain and the those in Florida, or whether it was the British and it was the those on the East Coast of the United States, or if it was the French and it was the Iroquois and the Algonquin. They teamed up with the Algonquin to actually defend against the Iroquois, but they had to learn the languages in order to communicate with them when it came to calling for peace or trade as well. Because the French tried to trade with every tribe there. They didn't want to come on the bad side of anyone because that's where they got most of their furs from. It wasn't actually trapping as much as it was trading with the natives to be able to get the hides. And a lot of them learned this, that there was greater benefit by making friends with these tribes than it was to attack and try to take over that tribe and even their land. So that's why they tried to work together. So this is an image of one of the groups from there. This is the Yakima people. And they were a plateau group, though they were a smaller group that wasn't on the map. It was actually on the map that you didn't see, but it's too small to see. So the Yakima group, these are ones that would wear the headdresses that you see in most Native American Wild West culture. Actually, the Great Basin were as well, as you would see here, though you don't see it in this, because in here, the chiefs would be the ones doing it, and not as much actually in most of the Great Basin tribes, but the plateau, they would be wearing that. Okay, so now let's go down to, in the curriculum, you're going to have the last two North American indigenous groups, cultures, that we're going to be studying. The first is the Great Basin and the Plateau. That's going to be one chapter. The next chapter is on actually one set of the Southeast. Again, if we go back, when we go back and look at the pictures, you're going to see that there's a Southeast and there's a Northeast. Northeast. Northeast was mostly the Hopewell and Adena. Down south, the group that was the most ancient, the ones that actually have archaeological findings on, are not actually seen on this map. So this area was dominated by what is called the Poverty Point people. So the Poverty Point culture was this group that actually settled more in the Mississippi area. So they settled here. And from there is where a lot of these people came from. And a lot of times when you're talking about the Age of Exploration, you're going to be learning about all the different tribes that people interacted with. If you're talking about the Spanish, you're going to see a lot of the Seminole, the Appalachian, and they don't show it here, but the Cherokee. Actually, I'm wondering why we don't show the Cherokee. Cherokee Nation was actually built of a few different tribes, so it might be that these are all individual tribes, but they were in this area. Oh, sorry, Cherokee. There we go. So, yeah, I guess they're a little bit north. They were actually all over this area, but yeah. So going forward, we are going to be talking about the Poverty Point people. There's one reason why Poverty Point is so essential to learn about. Again, it was one of the major cultures where all these were built off of, but even more than that, they were great engineers. That's right. They were great engineers. And you know how we know this? By some of their earthwork. Okay, so just like the Hopewell and Adena had earthwork, so did the uh, sorry, I forgot it again. Poverty Point culture. And like all times I'm talking about these cultures, I'm gonna have to repeat them multiple times so I can get them memorized, or at least get my tongue to be able to say them. So if you look here, you're gonna see all these little markings on the map. You're gonna have to look this up. Look at Poverty Point earthwork. If you look that up in Google, you'll see images of all of these different earth mounds that are encircling one area. That area is actually right next to the ocean, next to the river, right there. So let me show you how this actually looks. And this is why I say they're great engineers. It was a complete semicircle around the mound, around the epicenter of this engineering feat. Now, here's the great thing. Here's the most interesting thing about this is we have no clue whatsoever what this is about. Everyone has an idea. Everyone has a theory, but no one has a set fact of what this was about. But if you're looking at the picture, you're going to see a winding river of the Bayou Macon. And as that bayou goes up, you're going to have one mound in the middle, one area in the middle, and all of these mounds encircling this, going against the river. So up to the river, the mounds start, they go around the main mound in the middle, and they end up at the river above it in the north. Almost completely in the exact same distance all the way around. And there's 5 levels of these mounds. So some people say that these were places where you traded. That each place was actually a spot where you traded goods. Some people say it was a religious area, which it could have been. People could have been sitting on the mounds in order to see it, much like we have in many different places, but the amphitheaters we have, whether we made of now or those of the past, you have places that you set up in a semicircle around a center spot. That center spot is usually lower than everything else. Each level going around that spot is at a higher level, so you can actually see the person speaking. And then you have the next level up. You step up into the next area, and you have another level that's a little bit higher than the first, and ongoing until you get to the top level, which is the highest, so everyone can look down on that. Now, creating these mounds would give you the ability to sit up higher and be able to look upon that epicenter, that middle spot. And so there are mounds like this. There's one just like this, but there's mounds with amazing engineering all across the U.S. In the southeast and the northeast, you'll actually see a lot of these spots. You'll find that the earthwork was actually meant for something, though most of the time we don't know what they are. A lot of times they were actually for things like burial sites, which we showed with the Hopewell Indians. The Hopewell Indians would actually bury their loved ones inside a mound and would add to it, and then would put another person or another few people and then add to it on top of that. And they would continue to bury the mound as more people joined the burial site. Fascinating. Some of the earthwork you could actually go into as well. So there's all these different things that you would have no idea they could actually do. Some of them have the idea that they knew about astronomy, and they knew about where the stars were moving, and they knew exactly how the seasons worked, and that these were based off the seasons as well. Because everything they did, again, remember, everything that they did was not for entertainment as much. Well, okay, there was some entertainment. Yes, they weren't boring people. But their main mission in life was not entertainment. It wasn't about fancy food. It was about survival. Unlike we are in the United States, we eat all the time. We're like constantly putting food in our mouth. I'm a big culprit of that. And I cannot stop eating. I have this little bit of addiction to food. It's called the seafood diet. I see food, I want to eat it. These people did not. Interesting enough, unlike us who have like 3 meals a day, if not snacks and everything else, these people may have eaten only twice a day. Or if they did, they had multiple small meals and never actually had a meal. They had basically a small amount of goods throughout the day because it all depends on if they had the food to survive. Again, everything's built on survival. These people, unlike us, actually had to really survive, which makes them even more fascinating because they made all these different ways up to be successful in the things that they do and be successful in their survival. So you're going to learn a lot of things in here. I'm not going to go everything. I mean, I did the first few times because I wanted to show you how the curriculum worked. Now there's just so many things to go over. So here is hopefully you already did this, but if you haven't done it, then I suggest this for the future chapters. Like we say in the lesson plans, is to find other people that you can each read a section and share it with everyone else, to do a presentation to everyone else. One, you're going to learn about it a lot faster, a lot more efficiently, but you're also going to be able to create a presentation that somebody else can learn from. Now, if they see the passion from you, it gets a lot better than if they're just reading it. The curriculum's great. You can read the curriculum. Please do. I don't want you to not think the curriculum is great and doing it. But learning from others is even better. So if you have multiple people that you can actually learn from and grow with, that's great. So you're going to learn a lot of things with the Poverty Point, the Great Basin, the Plateau people. There's one other group I did want to show you. And the reason why I want to do this is they're not one of the main 5 cultures. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yes, 5 cultures. 6. 5 cultures. As we have 5 chapters in this week, but they are also very important. This is, ooh, wait, come on. Yes, the people of California. So these are the indigenous people of California. And again, because I'm not the best on names, I don't want to butcher them, and so I'm not going to say them all. But the ones I do know, I mean, Mono, the Mono tribe, Yakut, the Salana. I'm actually quite interested that I don't know a lot of these names because I purposely love looking up Native American names. And a lot of these ones, the Miwok, that was actually right outside of where I used to live. I used to live just above the Bay Area in California. The Bay Area being San Francisco. I lived probably about 45 to almost 30 minutes away. And so I lived in this area, and so I got to see some of the Native American visitor centers or cultural centers that were here. My parents were very much into learning about the different tribes in the different areas. And so we got to live it. Also, I was part of the Boy Scouts, and we did that as well there. Okay, so this is also an important part. So if you're from California, look up the people of indigenous people of California. Look up the culture as well, because this is actually called the California culture, which spans from, again, a mixture of Washington State, Oregon, California, and down into Mexico. Baja, Mexico, that was all the California culture, which, again, is very different than the Great Basin or the Plateau, or actually has a lot of similarities to the Northwest Coast culture as well. So all of these mixed together. But here's the great part. Okay, so you're going to have some activities in the end. Again, archaeology, all these different things. Everything's in here the same way it was in the first few chapters that we went through, like the whole book on, or the whole chapter on. But I'm going to let you discover everything else that's in here, including the really fun, engaging activities that are in there. But what we're going to do, or what I wanted to make sure that you remember, next week, it's going to be the most fun. I have always been fascinated with Mesoamerica. Mesoamerica being the Olmecs first. We already talked about them. We showed a video, I think the 3rd video in the first week. We showed a video on it. Very fascinating. But then the Aztecs, the Maya people, and all of the small tribes that were built in there. The reason why it's so important to learn about the small tribes is because the small tribes were the ones that were taken over by the Aztecs or the Maya. And interesting enough, they made labor laws where you actually had to give a tribute to the Maya culture, the Maya or the Aztec, to Tenochtitlan, the main city, the capital of the Aztec nation. You had to give tribute to them on a regular basis. You had to work to survive or they would take you over. Now, you were already dominated by them, but they would kill you if you did not provide for them. And you would go to war with them if you did not provide a tribute to the dominating kingdom, which is why that empire was so much on top. And we will talk all about that next week. Again, look forward to the Olmecs, the Aztecs, the Maya, and so forth. Can't wait to talk to you next week. Hey, thanks so much for being with us, and we'll catch you next time. Take care. Bye-bye. If you have any comments or questions, add them to the comments below. Otherwise, we'll see you tomorrow, actually. Take care. Bye.